Opening Happiness. What's your book about?
Yeah. So it's about my journey toward trying to find happiness, and that really began when I lost it. And so my son is here tonight. My daughter's not with us. My wife is here. He's in college now. My daughter's in college. But when they were little, very little, my son was 2 and my daughter was just a little baby. I had the family that I always dreamed of, the family that I didn't have. And at a very young age, that was my goal. There was such a longing in my heart to have that. And life was bliss, joyous, peaceful, full. And in the evenings in our neighborhood, we would go around the street and kind of do a loop. And it was just kind of like what you'd picture happiness and joy. It was cool evenings, pulling them in a little red wagon like you would see on TV, and looking up, and the flowers and the cool night air, all of that sort of imagery.
All those
that
good
you could,
things.
Yeah. And one night we pulled in to the house, and we could hear the phone ringing, and this was back when we had phones in our houses. And so my wife went inside, and I stayed with the kids. I was getting them out. She went to get the phone, and she came to the door, frantic and wanting me to come in. So I ran to the door, and she said, "Your dad's on the phone. It's for you." And so I answered the phone, and my dad said, "Son, I'm calling from jail. I've been accused of a very serious crime." And that moment in itself was crushing. But not only was it that moment, it was like all of the things that ever happened in my life, from abuse to a violent home to really even an absent father, came leaping back on me. And happiness was ripped out of me in a sense. And when it's ripped out of you, that rip creates pain. And so if you can sort of imagine emptiness and pain mixed together, where the emptiness resides is pain. And so from that moment on, it was a journey toward trying to find what was taken from me that night.
Now, what did you find?
Yeah.
You had to find something.
So fast forwarding a bit, I went through this journey of trying to find what this thing was. And at this point, leading up to this moment with my father, I started to have a lot of questions about faith, intellectual questions, theological questions. And then going back a few years prior, I felt called to the ministry, went to Bible college. My mentor and my pastor of my whole childhood supporting me and encouraging me. And I came back from college, and when I did, he was having an affair. I could tell things were changed, and that was with somebody in my family. So I approached him about it, being too young to do so and no one to go with me, and he was terrifyingly angry, stood up, kicked me out, and took away my keys. And so I began this journey of trying to find happiness without God, trying to fill that void with things good and bad, wisdom, living in the moment, friendships, work, bad drinking,
These were
gambling.
Things that you were trying
to find. Is this it?
Because I have to say this to you.
Is this it? Yes.
Because as long as I've known you,
Yeah.
you are the happiest guy I've ever met. So it's hard for me to understand that whole part of when your life wasn't happy.
Yeah. And during this time period, I would work and I would take care of family. And those were the two things. And outside of that, it just was so painful and empty. It was just barely getting by, barely making it. And so I started a journal. which is ultimately how this book came about. And during that time, I was journaling, is this it, is this it, is this it? And I finally got to the end, and I just couldn't find it, and I gave up, and I stopped journaling. And I accepted that maybe that's just the way things are, and I just kept going. And I had this ideal that occurred to me that might make things a little bit better, and that was to volunteer, just to do it more on a routine basis. So where did I find happiness? I sat down and I did a Google search, and immediately on the first page was
Wait.
Yes.
You did a Google search on what?
On what? Yes, volunteering locally.
Thank you, I missed that.
Yes, thank you. I didn't say it.
Okay.
And immediately on that first page, I think it was the second line, it was an ad for a ministry, a prison ministry that takes takes books into prison so that children can read to their fathers. That reading is recorded, and then the book and the recording and a handmade card goes to the child. And that sent a chill down my spine, because not only was my father incarcerated, but he was illiterate. And I knew that's what I needed to do.
So the kid would actually be reading.
Yeah. So I went into prison for the first time, not as a visitor, but as a volunteer. Sat down and helped the men find books, and we got organized, and my job was just to observe. And the first dad read, and it was very, very moving to be there now as a child of a father and listening to men read to their children in this environment. And I really just tried to keep it together. It was so moving. And then the second dad began to read, and he lost it. He couldn't get out the first word. And the room went quiet, silent, respectful pause, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And then he began to read this little baby book with the little pictures and one word at the bottom, and I lost it. I just couldn't keep it together. But I could feel something in that room. During the time reading with these guys, I could feel it around me and in me, above me, beneath me, in me, in the men. And I could feel it in my bones. I could feel it in my spirits. And it was overwhelming. It was like that bliss again. When I would walk around the neighborhood with my kids, it was there. But I was just completely in the moment, not thinking about it. So we went around the room and we read. We left. And as we exited the building, the other volunteer asked me how it went. And then I really lost it. I just started weeping. This is early in the day, a work day, and I felt like I really couldn't go to work. But I was so full. I just wanted to be in that thing that happened there. And it was still lingering even though I left. So the next day I woke up, and when I woke up, it was always about pain greeting me in the morning, this pain that I was experiencing along with my father, and it would stay with me all day long until I went to sleep. I would long just to kind of be unconscious. But I woke up that next morning, and my kids were playing outside my room, and I peeked over and I could look at them, and I smiled. And then I looked and I waited, and the pain didn't come back. It didn't come. It wasn't there. And I thought, wow, maybe this is one of those things where you think about it and it happens. I didn't want it to happen, but I'm observing and waiting, and nothing. Complete peace, fullness, joy, happiness. And that's when I realized that day before, when I was in prison, something happened. I found the thing that I was looking for, and I had to determine what that was. So I spent more time reflecting and thinking and studying, really, and just trying to peel back what happened that day. And finally I concluded it was the love in that room that changed me in an instant, put me together, healed me, took away the pain, filled me, and gave me happiness again. I thought, wow, how can love do that? That's crazy. It's love. Love is the thing. It is the source of happiness. But then I kept thinking and working through this, and then I wondered, what is love? love. What is love? If it was here before me and it's here after me, and it was all around us and in us, and going home to the children and the children to the fathers, what is this reality? What is this thing? I didn't go into prison to find God, but then I ended up in John. And John says, God is love. When I was in prison, you visited me. Only God can do something like that. Only God can orchestrate, engineer something like that, where the very thing that tore to pieces my family's life is the thing that he was sitting there and waiting, and he put me back together using that same very thing. Only God can do that. So where did I find happiness? I wasn't really looking for it in God, but he was there waiting for me in the deepest, darkest place, the place that I wasn't going to look for him. And he shattered me and put me together and gave me happiness once again.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
That's a blessing. Now, see, yes, give Rick a hand. One of the things that's just phenomenal, what you're saying about you got into volunteering, and the Lord ends up doing something to you
right,
when you're trying to help somebody else.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
what Jesus teaches. That's what Jesus teaches. And if we, as a people, and that's one of the reasons that we started even 4th Fridays, is to hopefully get some of our friends and fellow musicians and people like yourself to go into prison. I mean, because that's part of what the camp is. I mean, it's like there's an opportunity, and it's like God is waiting behind the walls for us, because he ministers to us more than we minister to other people.
Absolutely.
Well, he ministered to us. That's the whole point.
Yeah. And it's totally true. And it's not why you do it, but when you do it, that's what happens. And that was something that my version of the faith and of Christianity and my understanding of God totally changed because of exactly what you said. I realized my prior faith and walk with God, I wasn't loving all of God because I wasn't loving him and others, right? Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. My love for, if one of those three pieces are not there, the whole thing almost collapses.
It does. Right?
And so it's very difficult to live a full Christian life in the faith unless you have complete love for God. That's not what I set out to do.
That's what the word
But
teaches.
that's what he gave me.
That's right. Absolutely.
Total grace. Yeah.
It's a blessing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what else to ask you. You told the whole story.
I know. I didn't mean to jump into that. We had a list of questions.
Denise, never give the writer the question. He's got all these notes. I say, well, I'm just going to have to sit back here and just listen. Go ahead. That's
you
good, though.
Good about it.
No, it's good. It's good. But give Rick a hand. Really thank you for coming and sharing with us.